Okay, let me try and do a quick update. Oh, I just remembered I wanted to do something that would have lasting effect. I'm not sure if I can do. I study a lot on websites and blogs and all. I didn't plan on teaching this, but there are a few keys to doing websites, to doing blogs, and to learning not just how to do a blog, but how to get SEO, search engine optimization. A lot of those things I learned just on my own, doing things, and then I looked at a couple of guys that teach courses, and of course those are the important things. I just started a third YouTube site, by the way, and it'll be CC Outreach 87, but there are reasons why you do multiple sites. I have other ones as well, but for right now, I'm going to do another YouTube one. But whenever you do videos, a couple of keys to blogging, I'll do it real quick. You always try to put your links to those videos in text posts. Google search rank, Google ratings, when you Google a name or a ministry or whatever, they give preference to longer in-depth articles. Okay? A lot of people don't read them. But Google, there's a lot of people online with a lot of things and all, but they're looking, one of the key things is produce good stuff. Okay, not just rantings and ravings, which we all do at times, which I'll do in a minute, but produce quality stuff. Use video as well as text posts. Mix them together and put your links. These are all things, watching a couple of the shows, learning over the years, but these are the main things. Use good titles. There was an article I was reading, examples of these things. There was one article that the title said something like, how does Target, the store, know about various people, that things they want to purchase, and it talked about online advertising. And that same article was then reposted in another online site. Forbes magazine reposted it like a year or two later, same article, and it simply said, like, how do they know about what your kids are going to buy before they buy them? Just because of the title on the entire article, it got like almost 1 million hits, reads, compared to maybe 100,000. So these are there are various little keys to using what we have available today. Okay, Twitter, internet, and now you have all these other ones, all right? So maybe one day I'll just do one on that, effective. I was just listening to NPR News, which is liberal news, and I stopped to do this video. They had a story of a 70-something-year-old man who had committed multiple murders, 30 years, 40 years ago. And he was in prison, and he's now released. His time is up. But I forget what state it was. It was just on NPR News, this real-time update. And they're still holding him in prison. That's what it was talking about, because wherever they would release him, any community or a halfway house, his time is up, but they're holding him because people in the different cities that he was going to move to protested. Now, I thought that was illegal, meaning he has no charges against him. He's a U.S. citizen and his time is up. It just so happened they had the interview of the man. He's in his 70s. He got converted in prison, and he's actually willing to stay in prison. And then they did a quick interview, and he's does Bible studies in prison. He's 77 or something. He said, I understand how they feel about me, and, if I have to, I'll just finish my time in prison. Now, I'm not advocating for him because of that aspect. I did not know they do that in this country. And then it reminded me. Yesterday, I visited one of my friends, and there's another friend I have not seen in a while. And sometimes you hear things and it's possible he was killed. All right, that's how things are. And somebody mentioned to me, John, there's so many killings that take place in our community over the years that are just absolutely unreported. And that came up this last week again. I've heard this many times. people that are basically homeless, or they're in a life of crime, but they don't have any family. And look, as God is my witness, they say when these people are killed, nobody reports them missing. And supposedly, and that's where you've seen me talk about all of the unreported homicides in Corpus Christi. That's what I mean when I say that. And I always look in the newspaper and I look to check. There have been a few people that have indeed died. One was a girl. And I kept thinking, because they talked about that like 2 years ago, oh, she's dead, she's dead. And now I look online. I look in the media and I check all the news, and they never reported that girl as a homicide. But indeed, as far as I can tell, because I looked, she was murdered. Look, but the thing I want to say is, one of my friends who now, supposedly, we don't know what happened to him, but he did 26 years in prison. You know what he told me? The last 8 months, the last year. You've seen that particular friend, his name is not important to know. He said, you know, John, a lot of the guys, particularly the sex offenders, he said, in prison, and my friend was not in prison for that. He was in prison for a very huge hauling drugs. He was dealing back in many years ago, got busted for that, and did supposedly 26 years. But he told me, he said, you know, John, the guys that are getting out, their term is over. They were arrested, they went to trial. He said they're holding those guys for years, John, in Texas, against their will. These are the sex offenders, he said. And he even told me, John, he said, in prison, you know, we don't like those guys. He said, but I never thought that in the United States of America, these prison guards can hold these sex offenders. The other thing I'll remind you, Mark Twain, you know who reminded me of this? One of my homeless friends, Ray. He said, Mark Twain said, some of the most corrupt people or wicked people in the United States are the prison guards. Now, I'm not going to say this as a blatant thing of all prison guards or all cops. This week, once again, I heard stories of people in official capacities who raped men. I told my friend yesterday, I said, you know, I've reported that on my videos, by the way, brother. But some of these sex offenders in Texas, or just people in general, like the man I heard on NPR, they hold them in prison, and in some cases the guards use them to have anal sex with them on a regular basis, the guards, or cops. Not all cops, but some. Not all guards, but some. And I think you're a disgrace. You are an utter disgrace, those of you involved in that. You are the height of criminality. You are the height of criminality. And so this is just one update, because I did indeed hear that. And my friend had told me, he said, John, they're holding guys in Texas for years illegally. Guys that their term is up, it's time to get out. We're not going to process your papers, son of a bitch. You're sitting in here 7, 8, 10 years, totally exonerated. I mean, you did your time. We're going to just hold you. You say, well, how did they do? They break the law. It's called living in the Wild West, where there is absolutely zero law. And I'll tell you, I'm not lying to you, that this past week again, they said how there've been a whole history of unreported homicides in Corpus Christi and Flower Bluff. And I believe that. I believe that. And those of you in the local community, I saw the Color Times once again. Mr. Mauricio Celis, the connection with Judge Manuel Benales, all of the drug cartels and everything. And the Color Times did a wonderful article on him the other day. He has now been exonerated of his drug laundering. The Color Times covered up for drug, Mexican cartel collusion, corruption. And then they did a wonderful, beautiful article on the corrupt leadership in this community. And they are a newspaper that does everything they do for money. They sell their papers for money. They write articles for money. And they cover up for corruption in this community for money. And then they have the gall to say, and how can you call us fake news? Besides the fact that you are some of the most uninformed people ever in the history of the world. In your whole coverage of just about everything. It's because of your bias. So, yes, they just did it the other day in one of these papers. They talked about these illegal drug connections that were connected in this community with these judges. National media tried to look at that. They covered for that. And then they just did one the other day talking about, once again, remember that, your caller times in Corpus Christi, Texas, if it has to do with a Mexican judge connected with drug cartels and money laundering and every other crime under the sun, they will advocate. And I stopped buying the paper. I just am checking the news online. And I would recommend for every Christian in this community to follow that example. Because they also have advocated for the murder and the abortion of children right up into the day of birth, fully formed children. And they advocate for that act, and then people that have spoken against that act, they've mocked them. So I do believe Christians should stop buying that rag, that disgrace, that claims to be media. And you should have never used the name Corpus Christi on your paper. And you, city, how dare you use that name? Our port of Corpus Christi tries to sue and is suing another organization because that organization uses the name Corpus Christi. And the port here says all money that comes from the name Corpus Christi, Port of Corpus Christi, should come to us. We are the den of thieves. Every one of you that makes cash money from the name Corpus Christi, you have no right to do that. I take zero money. That's where you see it on my side. That's the name of the body of Christ. You should take that off your paper. You're making cash money off of the death of the Son of God. That's what you're doing.